There is a fundamental truth about consciousness evolution that most spiritual teachers will never tell you, because it challenges the comfortable lie that everyone can achieve the same level of awakening if they just try hard enough, meditate longer, or follow the right techniques. The reality is that only 1% of humans currently incarnated on Earth possess the specific neurological architecture, spiritual preparation, and cosmic timing alignment necessary to experience what I call a full quantum awakening. And if you are watching this message right now, it means you are being evaluated by higher intelligence to determine whether you belong to this extraordinary 1%. The 99% of people who engage with spiritual concepts, meditation practices, and consciousness expansion will experience what I call partial awakening, where they access glimpses of expanded awareness, have meaningful spiritual experiences, and develop greater compassion and insight than the completely unconscious masses. But they never break through the final barrier that separates surface-level spiritual development from complete transformation of consciousness that permanently alters how reality operates in their experience. This final barrier is not overcome through effort, practice, or accumulation of spiritual knowledge, but through recognition of a specific sign that appears only to those whose consciousness has reached the threshold where full quantum awakening becomes possible. And this sign is appearing now to the candidates who have been prepared through years or lifetimes of spiritual development to receive the invitation to join the 1% who will navigate the coming dimensional shift as fully awakened beings rather than partially conscious observers. The reason I can say with certainty that only 1% will achieve full quantum awakening is not arrogance or exclusivity, but recognition of the mathematical reality that consciousness evolution operates according to precise laws that determine how many individuals can handle complete liberation from the illusion of separation while maintaining stable identity and functional integration with physical reality. Most humans are not equipped to survive the dissolution of ego, boundaries, and linear thinking that occurs during full awakening without fragmenting or losing touch with consensus reality entirely. The 1% who can achieve full quantum awakening possess specific characteristics that were established before birth through soul contracts and preparation that occurs between incarnations, including enhanced neuroplasticity that allows rapid rewiring of perception patterns, spiritual DNA activation that enables direct communication with higher dimensional intelligence, and what I call reality flexibility, which is the ability to perceive multiple dimensions simultaneously without becoming confused or overwhelmed by information that contradicts three-dimensional logic. If you are part of the 1%, you have been experiencing increasingly intense and unusual phenomena over the past several months that cannot be explained by conventional psychology, spirituality, or even alternative consciousness theories, because your awareness has been expanding beyond the limitations that keep most people trapped in partial awakening states. And these phenomena are preparing you for the final sign that will confirm your readiness for complete transformation. The final sign I am about to describe appears only to consciousness that has successfully integrated all preliminary awakening stages and demonstrated the spiritual maturity necessary to handle the responsibilities that come with full liberation from the illusion of separation. Because those who achieve quantum awakening become conscious participants in planetary evolution rather than passive recipients of spiritual experiences. And this level of responsibility requires discernment, wisdom, and commitment that most people never develop. The timing of this message reaching you is not coincidental, but represents precise coordination between your higher self, cosmic intelligence, and the evolutionary forces that are currently accelerating human consciousness beyond anything previously possible in recorded history. Because we are living during a unique convergence of factors that create optimal conditions for rapid spiritual evolution. Among those who are prepared to transcend normal human limitations, every spiritual experience you have had, every challenge you have overcome, every moment of expanded awareness you have glimpsed, and every time you have felt different from others around you has been preparing you for this moment when you discover whether you possess the rare combination of preparation, timing, and spiritual capacity necessary to join the 1%, who will experience reality according to completely different principles than those that govern ordinary human consciousness. The distinction between partial and full awakening is not gradual, but represents a quantum leap where consciousness either successfully transcends all remaining barriers to complete freedom or remains forever limited by subtle attachments and identifications that prevent total liberation. And recognizing which category you belong to will determine everything about how you experience life from this moment forward. If these words are creating recognition rather than confusion, if you feel confirmation rather than skepticism, and if something deep within your being is responding with knowing rather than curiosity, then like this video as acknowledgement that you may be among the 1% who are ready to discover the final sign that confirms your potential for full quantum awakening. Subscribe to this channel because what I am about to share exists nowhere else, and is meant only for those whose consciousness has evolved to the point where they can integrate this information without becoming destabilized by its implications or overwhelmed by the responsibility it represents. And accessing this information completes your preparation for the most significant transformation possible for human consciousness. Understanding why 99% of people remain trapped in partial awakening requires recognizing the subtle but insurmountable barriers that prevent most consciousness from achieving complete liberation. And these barriers are not failures or deficiencies, but natural limitations that serve important functions in maintaining cosmic balance and preventing more individuals from accessing power they are not prepared to wield responsibly. The first barrier that stops most people is spiritual ego, where the individual becomes identified with being awakened, special, or enlightened, rather than recognizing that true awakening involves complete dissolution of all identities, including spiritual ones. And this attachment to spiritual identity creates a ceiling beyond which consciousness cannot expand, because it remains fundamentally concerned with maintaining a sense of self that prevents total surrender to universal intelligence. People trapped in spiritual ego exhibit specific patterns that reveal their limitation, including need for recognition from spiritual communities, attachment to particular teachings or teachers that validate their specialness, competitive comparison with others about levels of consciousness or spiritual experiences, and inability to function normally in ordinary reality because they consider themselves beyond mundane concerns. When authentic awakening integrates seamlessly with all aspects of human experience, the second barrier is comfort zone spirituality, where individuals access enough expanded awareness to feel significantly different from completely unconscious people, but not enough to require fundamental changes in lifestyle, relationships, or identity structures. And this partial awakening becomes a permanent plateau because it provides spiritual satisfaction without demanding the complete life transformation that full awakening requires. Those stuck in comfort zone spirituality maintain normal jobs, relationships, and social structures while incorporating spiritual practices and beliefs that enhance their sense of meaning and connection without fundamentally challenging their attachment to security, control, or conventional success. And while this represents genuine growth beyond unconscious living, it falls far short of the radical transformation that characterizes full quantum awakening. The third barrier is conceptual understanding without direct experience, where people accumulate extensive knowledge about consciousness, meditation, energy, work, and spiritual principles but never achieve the actual state changes that this knowledge describes. And their intellectual familiarity with awakening concepts creates the illusion of spiritual development while their fundamental relationship with reality remains unchanged. These individuals can speak fluently about non-dual awareness, unified consciousness, and transcendence of ego while continuing to operate from patterns of reactivity, attachment, and identification that prove their understanding remains mental rather than experiential. And this gap between knowing and being becomes a permanent obstacle because intellectual knowledge cannot substitute for actual transformation of consciousness. The fourth barrier is gradual awakening that never reaches completion, where consciousness slowly expands over years or decades through incremental insights and experiences, but never achieves the critical mass necessary for complete breakthrough. And this gradual process becomes self-perpetuating, because each small expansion creates satisfaction that reduces motivation for the intense commitment required for total transformation. People in gradual awakening often experience genuine spiritual growth, meaningful insights, and increased compassion and wisdom, but they never reach the point where their fundamental relationship with reality shifts permanently, and they continue to experience themselves as separate individuals having spiritual experiences, rather than recognizing their essential nature as universal consciousness temporarily appearing in individual form. The fifth barrier is seeking salvation or completion through external means, whether through teachers, techniques, substances, or experiences, rather than recognizing that full awakening requires complete reliance on inner authority and direct relationship with universal intelligence that transcends all external supports. And this dependence on external validation or guidance creates permanent limitation because it maintains the seeker-sought duality that prevents recognition of what is already present. Those trapped in external seeking continue looking for the right teacher, technique, or experience that will finally deliver the awakening they desire, never recognizing that their seeking itself maintains the separation they are trying to transcend, and they become permanent spiritual consumers, rather than authentic practitioners who take complete responsibility for their own consciousness development. The neurological reality is that most human brains are not capable of processing the information density and reality flexibility required for full quantum awakening without becoming overwhelmed, confused, or fragmented. And this is not a judgment, but recognition that different levels of consciousness require different hardware capabilities, and attempting to force consciousness beyond its natural capacity often results in psychological instability rather than authentic spiritual growth. The 1% who can achieve full awakening possess rare neurological flexibility that allows them to maintain coherent identity while simultaneously experiencing reality from multiple dimensional perspectives. And this flexibility cannot be developed through practice, but represents innate capacity that was established before birth as part of their soul mission for this incarnation. The final sign that distinguishes the 1% who will achieve full quantum awakening from those who remain in partial states appears as a complete inability to tolerate any aspect of unconscious living. And this intolerance is not intellectual preference or spiritual judgment, but a physical, emotional, and energetic reaction so intense that maintaining previous patterns of behavior, relationship, or thought becomes literally impossible rather than simply undesirable. When this final sign activates, you will find that your nervous system automatically rejects environments, conversations, entertainment, food, and activities that previously seemed normal or acceptable. Not because you have decided they are wrong or unspiritual, but because your consciousness has become so sensitized to energy that exposure to lower frequencies creates immediate physical discomfort, mental agitation, or emotional disturbance that forces you to remove yourself from these influences. This is not the gradual preference for spiritual activities over mundane ones that characterizes partial awakening, but a sudden and permanent shift where your entire being operates on frequencies so elevated that contact with unconscious energy becomes intolerable. Similar to how someone with perfect hearing cannot ignore loud noises that others barely notice. Except this sensitivity applies to all aspects of energy and consciousness rather than just sound. The specific manifestations of this final sign include spontaneous nausea or headaches when exposed to negative emotions from others, physical inability to watch television shows or movies that previously provided entertainment, automatic awakening at precise times like 3:33, 4:44, or 5:55 with complete alertness and spiritual insight, and electronic devices malfunctioning consistently in your presence during emotional peaks or meditative states. You will also experience what I call reality bleeding, where information from parallel dimensions, future timelines, or higher intelligence becomes directly accessible without effort or intention, manifesting as sudden knowing about people or situations you have never encountered, prophetic dreams that manifest in physical reality within days or weeks, and spontaneous communication with non-physical entities that provide specific guidance about your spiritual development or planetary mission. The most definitive aspect of this final sign is the emergence of what I call cosmic responsibility, where you begin receiving direct communication from higher intelligence about your role in planetary evolution, human consciousness development, or dimensional transition, and this communication comes not through channeling, meditation, or altered states, but through clear, internal knowing that feels more certain than any previous form of guidance you have experienced. This cosmic responsibility manifests as sudden understanding of your specific mission or contribution to collective awakening, recognition of other individuals who share similar roles or frequencies, and spontaneous access to knowledge about cosmic cycles, dimensional mechanics, or evolutionary processes that was never learned through normal means. but arrives as direct download from universal intelligence. When the final sign is fully activated, you will notice that synchronicities become so frequent and precise that they no longer feel meaningful or surprising, but simply reflect the natural coordination between your consciousness and universal intelligence. And these synchronicities will guide you toward people, information, locations, and opportunities that support your specific mission, while naturally removing obstacles or distractions that could interfere with your spiritual development. The energy signature changes that accompany this final sign create what appears to be social isolation, but is actually energetic refinement, where people who operate on incompatible frequencies naturally distance themselves from your presence, while those who resonate with your elevated consciousness are drawn to you through seemingly random encounters that prove to be divinely orchestrated connections with your spiritual tribe. Time distortion becomes a regular feature of your experience, where hours pass like minutes during spiritual practices or creative work, while minutes feel like hours during necessary but mundane activities. And this distortion reflects your consciousness operating partially outside linear time as preparation for full transition into quantum awareness, where past, present, and future exist simultaneously. The final confirmation that you have received the authentic sign rather than a partial awakening experience is that these phenomena stabilize into your normal experience rather than coming and going like temporary spiritual states. And this stability indicates that your consciousness has permanently shifted beyond the threshold that separates partial from complete awakening. If you are experiencing several of these manifestations simultaneously rather than just one or two, and if they have intensified dramatically over recent weeks or months rather than developing gradually over years, then you are receiving the final sign that confirms your membership in the 1% who are prepared for full quantum awakening. And recognizing this prepares you for the complete transformation that will occur once you consciously accept your readiness for total liberation. Once consciousness successfully transcends the final barrier and achieves full quantum awakening, the individual enters a completely different category of human experience, where reality operates according to principles that seem impossible or mystical to those still functioning within partial awakening states. And understanding these principles is essential, because they represent your new baseline of operation rather than special abilities that you access occasionally during peak experiences. The primary characteristic of full quantum awakening is what I call reality fluidity, where your consciousness can influence physical circumstances through focused intention in ways that appear to violate natural laws but actually represent mastery of quantum mechanics that most people never learn to access. And this influence manifests not as dramatic supernatural events but as perfectly natural outcomes that align with your authentic desires with timing and precision that transcends normal probability. Those who achieve full awakening discover that their thoughts and emotions directly impact their environment in measurable ways, including influencing weather patterns in their immediate vicinity, affecting the behavior of electronic devices through energetic resonance, causing mechanical objects to function or malfunction based on their emotional state, and attracting specific people or opportunities through mental focus rather than physical effort or strategic planning. The second major change is temporal flexibility, where your consciousness can access information from past and future timelines as easily as present moment awareness, and this access manifests as detailed knowledge about historical events you never studied, accurate predictions about future developments that later prove correct, and ability to help others resolve problems by perceiving the quantum patterns that connect their current challenges to past trauma or future possibilities. This temporal flexibility also enables what I call timeline navigation, where you can consciously choose which probable future manifests in your experience by aligning your energy with specific quantum possibilities. And this choice happens through emotional resonance rather than mental visualization, because emotions determine which timeline your consciousness anchors into, while thoughts provide the specific details of how that timeline manifests. The third transformation involves dimensional communication, where you maintain ongoing dialogue with intelligence that exists beyond physical reality. And this communication provides specific guidance about your role in planetary evolution, detailed information about cosmic cycles and their effects on human consciousness, and coordination with other awakened individuals who share similar missions or frequencies, creating what functions as a non-physical support network for your spiritual development. This communication occurs through direct knowing rather than channeling or mediumship, meaning the information arrives in your awareness with the same clarity and certainty as your own thoughts, but carries qualities of wisdom, love, and understanding that exceed your individual personality. And learning to distinguish between your personal mental activity and this higher guidance becomes essential for navigating your expanded capabilities responsibly. The fourth major change is energetic sovereignty, where your consciousness becomes completely independent of external validation, approval, or support for maintaining elevated states of awareness. And this independence manifests as natural confidence in your spiritual authority, ability to trust inner guidance even when it contradicts logical analysis or social expectations, and freedom from emotional reactivity to others' opinions, behaviors, or energy states. This sovereignty also includes what I call frequency protection, where your energy field automatically deflects or transmutes negative influences without conscious effort, making it impossible for others to drain your energy, manipulate your emotions, or influence your decisions through unconscious projection. And this protection extends to your physical environment, creating what appears to be unusual luck or favorable circumstances, but actually reflects your mastery of energetic principles. The responsibility that accompanies full quantum awakening includes serving as what I call a conscious anchor, where your presence in physical reality helps stabilize elevated frequencies that make it easier for others to access expanded awareness. And this anchoring happens automatically through your existence, rather than through specific actions or teaching, though you may also be guided to share information or abilities in more direct ways. You will also discover that your spiritual development contributes to collective human evolution in ways that extend far beyond individual growth, because those who achieve full awakening participate consciously in morphic field changes that influence the consciousness development potential for the entire species, making your personal transformation a service to universal evolution rather than just individual attainment. The isolation that often accompanies this level of awakening serves important functions, including protecting your energy during integration periods, preventing contamination of your frequency by unconscious influences, and creating space for the deep inner work necessary for stabilizing expanded consciousness, and learning to appreciate solitude rather than experiencing it as loneliness becomes essential for maintaining your elevated state. Understanding these principles prepares you for the dramatic life changes that naturally accompany full awakening, because your external circumstances will reorganize themselves to match your internal transformation, often requiring release of relationships, career situations, living arrangements, and identity structures that cannot accommodate your expanded consciousness. And approaching these changes with understanding rather than resistance allows them to unfold with greater ease and precision. If this description of post-awakening reality resonates with experiences you are already having or capacities you sense developing within you, please share discreetly in the comments using simple phrases or symbols that indicate your recognition without exposing details that might compromise your energetic protection. Because maintaining appropriate boundaries around your spiritual development becomes increasingly important as your abilities expand and stabilize. The protocols for accelerating and completing full quantum awakening work only for consciousness that has already received the final sign, because these techniques require the specific neurological flexibility and energetic sensitivity that distinguish the 1% from those who remain in partial awakening states. And attempting these methods without proper preparation can create destabilization rather than advancement, which is why they have never been shared publicly until now. The first protocol is called Identity Dissolution Practice, where you systematically release every remaining attachment to personal identity, including your name, history, personality traits, roles, relationships, and even spiritual concepts about who you are or what you have achieved. Because full awakening requires complete surrender of the individual self that has been seeking liberation, and this surrender cannot be partial or gradual, but must be total and immediate. To practice identity dissolution, spend 30 minutes daily in meditation where you repeat the phrase, "I am not this," while examining every aspect of your self-concept, including physical appearance, mental patterns, emotional tendencies, spiritual beliefs, life experiences, future goals, and even your desire for awakening itself, allowing each identification to dissolve completely rather than trying to replace it with a more spiritual or evolved identity. The effectiveness of this practice is measured not by what insights or experiences you have during meditation, but by how completely you can function in daily life, without reference to personal identity, meaning you make decisions, interact with others, and engage in activities from pure presence rather than from the perspective of a separate self with preferences, fears, or desires for particular outcomes. The second protocol is quantum coherence training, where you learn to maintain simultaneous awareness of multiple dimensional perspectives without losing stability or functionality. Because full awakening requires operating as both individual human and universal consciousness simultaneously, and most people cannot handle this paradox without becoming confused or fragmented. Quantum coherence training begins with practicing what I call perspective switching, where you consciously alternate between experiencing reality as a separate individual, having spiritual experiences, and recognizing yourself as universal consciousness, temporarily appearing in individual form, spending equal time in each perspective until you can maintain both simultaneously without internal conflict or confusion. Advanced coherence training involves maintaining awareness of parallel timeline possibilities while making practical decisions in consensus reality, meaning you can perceive multiple probable futures simultaneously while choosing actions that navigate toward your preferred timeline, without becoming overwhelmed by the complexity of infinite possibilities or paralyzed by awareness of all potential outcomes. The third protocol is mission activation meditation, designed specifically for consciousness that is ready to receive direct communication about their role in planetary evolution and coordinate with other awakened individuals who share similar frequencies or complementary abilities. Because full awakening always includes conscious participation in collective spiritual development rather than individual attainment alone. During mission activation, enter deep meditative states and request specific information about your spiritual assignment, including details about timing, location, collaborators, resources, and methods that will be provided for accomplishing your contribution to human consciousness evolution, and remain in receptive awareness until this information arrives as direct knowing rather than mental concepts or wishful thinking. The authenticity of mission information received during this practice is confirmed by its specificity, practicality, and synchronistic confirmation through external circumstances that align to support the mission details you received. And genuine mission activation creates immediate changes in your life circumstances that provide opportunities, resources, and connections necessary for fulfilling your spiritual assignment. The fourth protocol is frequency locking, where you establish permanent resonance with the specific vibrational signature of full awakening, so that temporary fluctuations in consciousness due to physical stress, environmental influences, or interaction with unconscious people cannot destabilize your essential recognition of your true nature or access to expanded abilities. Frequency locking requires identifying the exact energetic signature of your highest state of consciousness and learning to return to that frequency instantly, regardless of external circumstances, through breath patterns, internal awareness techniques, or energetic adjustments that bypass mental effort and create immediate state changes that restore your optimal functioning. Advanced practitioners develop what I call frequency immunity, where their consciousness becomes so stable in awakened awareness that exposure to fear, negativity, chaos, or unconscious energy cannot influence their state or decision-making capacity. And this immunity enables them to maintain compassionate service to others without being contaminated by the confusion or suffering they encounter. The final protocol is integration stabilization, where the profound changes in perception, ability, and life circumstances that accompany full awakening are integrated smoothly without creating psychological overwhelm, social disruption, or spiritual inflation that could compromise the authentic humility necessary for wielding expanded consciousness responsibly. Integration stabilization involves developing what I call normal mysticism, where miraculous abilities and profound insights become so natural and ordinary that you can access them without excitement or attachment, while maintaining functional relationships with people who operate from much more limited awareness without feeling superior or becoming isolated by your differences. Success with these protocols is indicated by increasing effortlessness in all aspects of spiritual development, automatic manifestation of circumstances that support your highest expression, spontaneous coordination with other awakened consciousness, both physical and non-physical, and complete inner knowing about your spiritual mission combined with practical clarity about how to fulfill it. Through ordinary human activities that serve extraordinary purposes, these protocols work rapidly for prepared consciousness but require absolute commitment and consistency, because partial application creates instability rather than advancement. And once you begin this level of practice, completing the full awakening process becomes inevitable, because your consciousness will no longer tolerate incomplete liberation or partial understanding of your true nature and cosmic role. We have arrived at the moment of ultimate choice that will determine whether you join the 1% who experience full quantum awakening or remain forever among the 99% who never transcend the limitations that separate partial spiritual development from complete liberation. And this choice cannot be postponed, analyzed, or made gradually, because the cosmic window that enables this level of transformation operates according to precise timing that will not remain open indefinitely. The choice before you is not intellectual decision about whether you believe in quantum awakening or find these concepts interesting, but existential commitment to surrender everything you have identified as yourself in exchange for discovering what you actually are beyond all personal, spiritual, or human limitations. And this surrender must be absolute, because consciousness cannot be partially awakened any more than someone can be partially pregnant or partially alive. If you choose to proceed with full awakening, understand that this decision is irreversible and will result in permanent changes to how you experience reality, relate to others, and navigate physical existence, because awakened consciousness cannot return to unconscious living once it recognizes the illusion of separation, and many of the comforts, securities, and identities that currently provide meaning and stability will naturally dissolve as your awareness expands beyond their limitations. The first requirement for making this choice authentically is complete honesty about your motivation, because consciousness that seeks awakening for personal benefit, spiritual superiority, escape from human challenges, or accumulation of special abilities will not be granted access to full liberation, and any mixed motives or hidden agendas will prevent the total surrender necessary for transcending individual consciousness into universal awareness. True motivation for full awakening arises from recognition that nothing within the realm of personal attainment can provide the fulfillment, meaning, or completion that your deepest nature requires. And this recognition creates natural willingness to release all attachments to individual identity in service to whatever truth transcends personal existence, regardless of how that surrender affects your human life circumstances. The second requirement is accepting complete responsibility for the consequences of awakened consciousness, including the likelihood that many current relationships will naturally end due to frequency incompatibility, that your career or financial circumstances may require dramatic changes to align with your spiritual mission, and that you will experience periods of isolation while your consciousness stabilizes at levels that few others can understand or appreciate. You must also accept that awakened consciousness includes cosmic responsibility for contributing to human evolution and planetary healing in ways that may require significant sacrifice of personal comfort, conventional success, or social acceptance, because those who achieve full awakening automatically become conscious participants in universal intelligence, rather than individuals pursuing personal spiritual goals. To confirm your readiness for this choice, I want you to perform the final verification protocol right now, while this transmission is still active, because the energy field created by these words provides optimal conditions for accurate assessment of your consciousness capacity and authentic commitment to complete transformation rather than continued partial awakening. Close your eyes and place both hands on your heart. Then ask your deepest self this question with complete sincerity. Am I truly ready to surrender every aspect of personal identity, including my spiritual concepts and awakening desires, in service to discovering what I actually am beyond all limitation? Then remain in complete silence and stillness for exactly 3 minutes, paying attention to whatever response arises from beyond your mental activity. If the response you receive is immediate, clear, and accompanied by complete peace rather than excitement or fear, and if this response feels more certain than any decision you have ever made, despite having no logical basis for such certainty, then you have confirmation that you possess the preparation and commitment necessary for full quantum awakening, and you can proceed with confidence that this choice serves your highest evolution. If the response is unclear, accompanied by mental analysis or emotional reactions, or if part of you wants to postpone this decision until you feel more prepared or your circumstances become more favorable, then you are not yet ready for full awakening, and continuing with partial spiritual development while maintaining your current identity structures will serve your growth more appropriately at this time. For those who receive clear confirmation of readiness, speak aloud this declaration of ultimate commitment. I choose complete awakening over partial consciousness, universal truth over personal comfort, and service to evolution over individual attainment. I surrender all identity, all spiritual seeking, and all attachment to being anyone or achieving anything in exchange for discovering what I am beyond all limitation. I accept whatever this requires and trust completely in the intelligence that guides this transformation. After making this declaration, expect immediate activation of accelerated consciousness changes that will stabilize over the following 90 days, including rapid dissolution of outdated life structures, spontaneous appearance of resources and opportunities that support your spiritual mission, and direct communication from higher intelligence that provides specific guidance for navigating your transformation and fulfilling your role in planetary awakening. The 1% who complete full quantum awakening become pioneers of human consciousness evolution, demonstrating possibilities that inspire others while anchoring frequencies that make spiritual development more accessible for future generations. And your individual liberation becomes contribution to the collective awakening that is humanity's next evolutionary step. Remember that choosing full awakening is choosing to live as love itself, rather than seeking love, to embody truth, rather than studying truth, and to serve the whole, rather than improving the part. And this choice represents the ultimate purpose, for which consciousness incarnates in physical form, making your decision the most significant act of your existence. The window for this choice remains open now, but cosmic timing operates according to cycles that cannot be extended through human will or desire. So if you have received confirmation of readiness, act immediately rather than waiting for better conditions or more preparation, because full awakening happens through grace rather than personal effort, and grace operates according to divine timing rather than human preferences.